It all started on a crisp, golden morning. The kind of morning that makes you take a deep breath and feel like everything's exactly where it's meant to be. The dew still clung to the grass as I stepped out onto my porch, coffee in one hand and feed bucket in the other. My boots sank slightly into the soft earth, and a few of the goats let out a bleat as they saw me coming down the path. This was my peace. My little patch of land tucked away on the edge of town. Nothing fancy, just a modest house, a couple acres of open space, and a barn that creaked when the wind blew a certain way. It wasn't the kind of life everyone would want, but it was mine. I worked hard to build it. Every nail, every fence post, every patch of worn-down grass, it all carried a piece of me. Most mornings were quiet. I'd wake up early, feed the animals, fix what needed fixing, and take a walk around the perimeter. It was more habit than necessity, but there was comfort in routine. I talked to the chickens like old friends. Scratched behind the ears of my milk cow, Daisy. And I could always count on Rufus, my old shepherd dog, to follow right at my heels. It was the kind of life that doesn't scream for attention. Simple, honest, peaceful. Except for one thing. One house over, tucked behind a tall, too-perfect hedge, lived Mrs. Kendall. She moved in about 8 months ago. I remember because she arrived with this sour expression like the air smelled bad. The moving truck hadn't even finished unloading and already she was glaring at my pasture like it offended her. She never waved. Never smiled. Just watched. She'd stand at her window or sometimes out on her porch, arms crossed, eyebrows pulled tight. I don't know if she hated animals, hated people, or just hated the fact that the world didn't spin according to her schedule. At first, I didn't pay her much mind. You live long enough, you meet all types. Some folks carry kindness in their pockets, and others carry matches, just waiting for a reason to light a fire. Still, I was raised to treat neighbors with respect, even the difficult ones. So I smiled when I passed her, waved politely when our paths crossed by the mailbox, offered her fresh eggs once when I had more than I could use. She refused with a tight shake of the head and a muttered, "No, thank you." That was fine. No harm done. But it wasn't long before little things started happening. I'd find notes tucked under my windshield wiper, complaints about animal noise or the smell of hay. She once yelled across the yard because one of my chickens had wandered too close to her fence line, clucking harmlessly. "This isn't a petting zoo," she snapped. I bit my tongue, took my chicken home, told myself she was just adjusting to country life. But the tension sat there, just beneath the surface, like a storm cloud that hadn't quite decided when to pour. Still, I refused to let it steal my peace. I had too much to be thankful for. I'd been through worse. Much worse. The truth is, this farm, this quiet life, it wasn't just a hobby. It was my sanctuary. A place I found after years of service, after watching too many people break and fall and not come back whole. Being out here, with nothing but animals and fresh air, it gave me space to breathe again. Most folks didn't know what I did for a living. I liked it that way. People see a uniform and they treat you different. Out here, I wasn't Deputy James. I was just the guy with the goats and the good eggs. But Mrs. Kendall, I think she saw my quietness as weakness. Mistook my calm for something to challenge. Like she was waiting for me to step out of line, just once. One Saturday morning, the sun had barely lifted over the tree line. The goats were especially noisy that day, nothing serious, just their usual excitement at feeding time. I had tossed them some fresh hay, and they were jumping around, bumping into each other, being their goofy, loud selves. That's when I saw her. She was on her porch, phone in hand, staring straight at me with a look of pure victory. I didn't think much of it. Honestly, I figured she was just taking pictures again. She'd done that before, snapping shots from her porch like she was gathering evidence for a court case no one asked for. But 20 minutes later, I heard the sirens. 2 patrol cars came rolling up the gravel path, tires crunching like thunder in the morning stillness. Rufus barked and trotted toward them, tail up, ears alert. I stood up slowly, wiped my hands on my jeans, and walked over to meet them. There was a strange feeling in my chest, part confusion, part annoyance, but mostly disbelief. I couldn't imagine why they were here. No one ever came down this road unless they had a reason. The officers stepped out. Young guys. One of them glanced around the yard like he was expecting to see a crime scene. The other looked straight at me. "Sir," he said, professional but cautious. "We got a call about a livestock disturbance." I blinked. What? Loud animals. Possibly outside local code. We were told they might be improperly contained. For a second, I didn't say anything. I just looked past them toward Mrs. Kendall's porch. She was standing there, arms crossed as usual, that same look of smug satisfaction on her face. It clicked instantly. She'd called them. On me. On my animals. On the very thing that kept me grounded. And in that moment, something shifted. Not anger. Not quite. But something close. Because I knew what was coming next. I knew exactly how this would go. I stood there for a moment, feeling the weight of it all press against my chest. The younger officer adjusted his belt. "Do you mind if we take a quick look around?" "Sure," I said calmly, nodding toward the pasture. "Go ahead." The goats were still bouncing around like toddlers on too much sugar, and the chickens clucked softly, scratching at the dirt. Daisy the cow swished her tail and blinked slow, uninterested in the morning drama. It was a scene so normal, so harmless, that it almost felt ridiculous watching them scan the yard like they were searching for something dangerous. I watched the officers walk the fence line, murmuring quietly to each other. Their boots crunched over gravel and dried leaves. One of them stopped to snap a picture of the goats, like he was trying to document some kind of chaos. I stayed silent. Let them do their thing. I'd seen this play out 100 times in 100 different ways. Behind me, I could still feel her eyes burning into the back of my neck. Mrs. Kendall stood on her porch like she was watching a reality show. Her arms were folded, lips pressed thin, chin tilted in victory. She'd waited for this moment, planned it, even. I could see it written all over her face. She wanted to see me nervous, flustered, on edge. What she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly have known, was that I had stood on front lines she couldn't imagine. I had stared down situations that could steal the breath right out of a man's lungs. This wasn't it. When the officers circled back toward me, one of them cleared his throat. "Look, sir," he began carefully, "we're not trying to cause trouble. It's just, when someone calls with a formal complaint, we're required to respond." "I understand," I said, voice steady. "She said there were noise issues. Possible violations." "Violations?" I asked, raising an eyebrow slightly. "Like what, exactly?" "Well," he glanced back toward her porch, almost like he didn't want to answer. "She said your animals were a public nuisance. That the noise level was excessive. That they were disrupting her sleep. At 8:30 in the morning." He gave a half-smile, more out of discomfort than humor. "Yeah, I know how it sounds." There was a pause. The silence stretched just long enough to feel heavy. "Can I see your ID, sir?" the other officer asked. "Just to have it on record." That's when everything changed. I didn't reach for my wallet. I reached for the black leather case tucked into the side pocket of my work coat. My fingers brushed against the edge of the badge, cool and solid beneath the surface. I held it out slowly, flipping it open with a quiet, deliberate motion. The gold glinted in the morning sun. The eagle at the top. The nameplate underneath. The seal of the department right in the center. Deputy Sheriff James Halton. The moment their eyes landed on it, the air shifted. The officer who asked for ID blinked, mouth opening just slightly before he caught himself. The younger one took a step back, straightening his posture. The casual tone vanished. Both men now looked at me with something entirely different in their expressions. Not fear. Not shame. Just understanding. Recognition. Respect. "Oh," the first officer said, clearing his throat again. "Deputy Halton. Sorry, we didn't realize." "I'm off duty," I said calmly. "Just tending my place." "Of course," he nodded quickly. "Absolutely. We, didn't have that information when we arrived." I figured. I looked past them, slowly, toward Mrs. Kendall. For the first time since this started, her confidence cracked. Her mouth twitched. Her posture stiffened. She took one step back, then another. Her phone, still in hand, now dangled loosely by her side. Her eyes met mine. And I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. Everything I could have said, every ounce of frustration I'd been holding in, every insult I'd swallowed, every ridiculous complaint I'd ignored, was already spoken, loud and clear, through that small golden badge. The officers turned slightly, following my gaze. They both glanced up at her, then back to me. "Looks like everything's in order here," one of them said. I nodded. "Always is." There was a moment of awkward shuffling, like they weren't quite sure how to wrap this up. One of them kicked at a clump of gravel. The other gave me a quick nod. "Well," he said, "we appreciate your cooperation. We'll file this as a resolved complaint. No violation." "Thanks," I said simply. They walked back to their cars. No sirens this time. No hurry. Just two guys doing their job, realizing they'd been pulled into someone else's nonsense. As the patrol cars rolled away, the tension began to ease. The goats returned to their normal clumsy antics, completely unaware of the drama they'd accidentally starred in. Rufus circled back and flopped down in the shade near the porch, letting out a low, satisfied sigh. I turned back toward my barn, brushing some hay off my jacket. My fingers lingered on the badge for just a second before tucking it away again. From the corner of my eye, I saw Mrs. Kendall turn and disappear into her house. No glares. No muttering. Just silence. For the first time since she moved in, she looked uncertain. Maybe even a little shaken. Like she'd misjudged something badly, and knew it. I didn't smile. I didn't smirk. I didn't need to. All I felt was a quiet, steady calm. Not the gloating kind. Just a simple peace. The kind that comes when someone finally learns you're not a man to be messed with. The next few days felt different. Not in any loud or obvious way. Life on the farm moved on like it always did. The animals didn't care what had happened that morning. They still needed feeding, still knocked over their water buckets, still nudged my legs for treats when I walked past. But the air around the place had shifted, just slightly. For one, it got quiet over at Mrs. Kendall's. No more standing on her porch, arms folded like she was guarding some invisible line. No more angry phone photos. No more cold stares through the curtains. If I hadn't seen her car parked in the driveway, I might have thought she'd moved out. The silence was satisfying in a way, but also strange. After all the noise she'd made, after dragging the law down my driveway like I was running some outlaw barnyard, it was almost like she had vanished. She didn't look my way when we crossed paths. She didn't send notes. She didn't so much as let her shadow fall over my fence line. And I left it at that. I had no interest in rubbing anything in her face. I'd said nothing when the badge came out, and I planned to keep it that way. There's a kind of power in not reacting, just standing firm, calm, steady. Letting people figure out on their own that they picked the wrong person to challenge. A few evenings later, I was out back fixing a section of the chicken wire that had come loose. The sun was low, stretching golden lines across the field. Rufus lay in the grass, half asleep, his ears still twitching now and then at the sound of birds or distant traffic. That's when I heard footsteps on gravel. Slow. Hesitant. I didn't turn around right away. Just kept working, gently looping the wire back through the post. Then came a voice. Tight. Forced. "Mr. Holton." It was her. I turned, standing slowly, brushing the dust off my hands. She stood a few feet back from the fence, arms at her sides for once. No crossed posture. No scowl. Just a nervous kind of stiffness, like she didn't know whether to speak or bolt. "Yes, ma'am," I answered politely. She hesitated. Her eyes didn't quite meet mine. She cleared her throat once, then again. I didn't know," she said, "that you were with the department." I nodded slowly. Wasn't trying to hide it. Just wasn't advertising it. "I see." There was another pause. She looked down, then back up. The wind tugged lightly at her blouse, and for the first time since I'd met her, she looked small. Not weak. Just unsure of herself. "I may have overreacted," she added, voice thin. "I figured as much," I said gently. She nodded once. Then her voice dropped even softer. I lost my husband to cancer 2 years ago. Moved out here to get away from the city noise. I thought this place would be quiet. Peaceful. It is, I said. You just have to let it be. She took in a breath like she'd been holding it for a long time. Her shoulders sagged a little. I thought you were careless. That maybe you didn't care how your animals affected others. I raised an eyebrow slightly. And now? She looked at the goats, huddled around their feed bins, wagging their tails, knocking each other playfully. Now I see you care. Maybe more than most. I didn't say anything right away. Just let her words settle into the air between us. I'm not trying to make excuses, she said after a moment. I just wanted to say I won't be calling anyone again. Not unless there's a real problem. And I'm sorry for how I handled it. I nodded once. I appreciate that. She gave a small, awkward smile. Then turned to walk away, but paused, like something else was still on her mind. I wasn't trying to embarrass you, she said over her shoulder. I know, I replied. But you did. That made her wince slightly. She gave the tiniest nod, then walked back across her yard without another word. The thing is, I didn't need an apology. I hadn't been waiting for one. But the way she said it, the way her voice cracked a little, the way her hands fidgeted, it told me this wasn't just about the animals or the badge. This was about fear. About control. About someone used to having the upper hand, suddenly realizing they were standing on unsteady ground. And maybe, just maybe, realizing they didn't have to stand alone. Over the next couple weeks, things stayed quiet. Not the kind of quiet that feels tense or loaded. Just peaceful. Easy. I caught her out in the garden one afternoon, tending to a row of flowers near her walkway. She looked up, nodded. I nodded back. No words. Just a simple exchange of human understanding. She even started waving when she passed by. Not always, and never with a smile, but it was a start. Life went on. The animals still demanded more attention than I sometimes had to give. Rufus still barked at the mail truck like it was a sworn enemy. The chickens still roamed wherever the fence had the weakest spot. And every morning, I stepped out into that same patch of earth, coffee in hand, feed bucket swinging, breathing in the same old peace that no one could take away. I didn't wear the badge around the farm after that day. I didn't need to. But I kept it close. Not as a threat. Not as a shield. Just as a reminder that strength doesn't have to be loud. That sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is stand quietly in the truth of who you are, until the world catches up.